This is a sermon for Sunday, the 31st of January 2021. I'll make sure that I put the readings for the day in the description box. I remember being on placement in a rural parish church in Oxfordshire about 2 years ago, and a rather dominant member of the community approached me and on arrival said, "Christopher, are you going to be a vicar?" I replied rather nervously, as one would, "Well, I hope so." "Oh, that's good," she replied. "Most of the clergy seem to wander off into cathedrals these days and write pointless books. But you stick at it, my lad. Remember, do 3 things. Visit, make yourself known to the community, and pray for them." Well, this lady, marvellous and eccentric as she was a little cynical and held rather strange views of clergy and cathedrals, but I got her point precisely. The mission of the church, of what it means to share the truth of Jesus, doesn't need to be terribly strategic or complex. It can be done very naturally. We, as followers of Christ in our mission to make him known and that love shown through our discipleship, are called to be people, I would argue, who are mindful. And I found it a really useful adjective throughout my whole ministry. I'm going to talk a little bit about the gospel and then I'll explain why. Well, in our story from St. Luke's Gospel, the infant Jesus is brought into the temple of Jerusalem and taken into the arms of Simeon, an old man who has been waiting for many years for this solemn moment. We know nothing really about him or about the prophetess Anna. Some would say that they were insignificant or not major biblical players. But they're recorded here for a very special reason. And they rejoice with tears of gladness at the sight of the Christ child, who is to be a light for the Gentiles. Gentiles, the ones who don't feel that they belong to the people of God. This child, Simeon exclaims, is a light of offering to everyone. And in the very way he is revealed, God, through Jesus, shows us something very important about that light. He doesn't come to the most powerful or the elite or those with self-entitlement. He comes to an old man and an old woman. Some may even call this pair eccentric. He comes for the Gentiles, those who feel to be outsiders, not part of the club, insignificant, and for the aged who think they've passed it. He comes as a light for all those on the margins, or pushed to the edge, or made to feel outsiders to God's purposes and promises. Well, in returning to the point I presented earlier, why are we to be mindful as Christians in living out the gospel? Well, simply, being mindful stops our focus becoming inward-looking and self-centred. To be mindful means that we centre ourselves on all God's children without partiality. To seek out those who feel far off, the outsiders, the ones not part of the club, and to be mindful of those who we meet regularly, that they're okay and feel loved and part of the community. In these days of lockdown, our connections with each other are very different. And in some ways, it's proved beneficial. So, for example, our online broadcasting may have reached far-flung audiences of all ages. And thinking also for those people who work on Sundays and are unable to partake in the physical worship that we would offer. And all this is sprung from our deep well of mindfulness. I wonder what God is placing on your heart this day. I wonder if there are ways that you can connect with people virtually. Are there people that you've not spoken with for a long time? Are there people that you know this day that are living alone and might just benefit from a conversation over the phone? And what about prayer? Is your prayer life constant? Do you hold before God the needs of the world and the needs of our local communities and all the people living in our local communities? Do you pray unceasingly like Anna? And do you rejoice like Simeon at the gift of Jesus for us and for us all? Well, our celebration of Candlemas today marks the end of Christmas and Epiphany. Candles are traditionally blessed, and congregations may process around the church, declaring themselves as sharers in that one eternal light of Christ, as beacons of God's love and of prayer. We are called to be mindful of the need of all God's children and how we can play our part in that. And thankfully, we are also mindful that we do this not in our own strength, but with the light and the love of God dwelling within us, so that we, in the name of Christ, can set the world ablaze.